The barrier keeping you out may already be gone. Hard problems, the ones affecting millions or billions of people, are becoming market positions. Most people with the resources and the ambition to build inside one have already done the market analysis. They know the scale. They have a view on the technology. They understand, at least in outline, what a solution would require. What they often have not yet done is map the choke points. A choke point is the specific point in a system where progress stalls, not because the problem is unsolvable, but because an institution built the rules when the economics were different. That distinction determines whether 5 years of effort produces a market position or a very expensive lesson. Structural choke points belong to the problem itself. Physics that will not bend for your business model, biology that sets hard limits on dose and risk, the deep complexity of human behavior at scale that no single product can simplify. These are the parts of the landscape you have to redesign around, not vote away. Institutional choke points belong to the institutions that last shaped the field, a reimbursement model designed for a different era, a licensing framework built around a delivery system that no longer exists, a verification standard inherited from an institution that has since exited the field. These can dissolve when the institution changes, reforms, or leaves. Often, they have already dissolved. The model has yet to update because nobody ran the calculation. This is the pattern playing out across 11 hard problem fields simultaneously. It is now economically viable to solve these problems. For years, institutions held the positions closed. As those institutions change or exit, the positions open. Capable people are still circling because they are running their assessment against the old map. The Chokepoint Map runs on a short set of questions. They take the circling phase and give it a direction. The pattern across 11 fields. Across these hard problem fields, the same pattern appears. The cost curves moved, in most cases years ago. The cost of the status quo is now measurably higher than the structural solution across field after field. That is the crossover point, operating at scale. The economics have crossed. The barrier keeping capable people out sits between that crossing and the market position, not in the problem itself. In most cases, it belongs to an institution that has already changed. 3 examples, briefly. Energy access. Battery pack prices fell 93% since 2010. Solar PV now costs around 4 US cents per kilowatt hour. Off-grid solar is the most cost-effective route to electricity for 41% of people still without access by 2030. The infrastructure wall is gone. What remains is permitting friction and grid interconnection requirements, institutional residue held in place by rules written for a different cost structure. Financial inclusion. India's JAM Trinity, combining Aadhaar identity, Jan Dhan accounts, and UPI payment rails, turned 1.3 billion people from unreachable to transactable at near zero marginal cost. The identity and access choke point that blocked an entire generation of financial inclusion models dissolved with it. GDP in money mobile countries was 600 US billion higher in 2022 than it would have been without mobile money. Legal exclusion. 1.4 billion people have unmet civil and administrative justice needs globally. Legal problems cost individuals an average of 1.7% of GDP in lost income and related burdens. Online dispute resolution systems now operate at roughly 12 times lower cost than comparable traditional court processes. The gatekeeper choke point is moving. The position is opening. These are the same story in different fields. The institution held the model in place. The institution changed. The position is available to whoever calculates it correctly and builds with the right assets. AMR, the clearest case. Antimicrobial resistance, AMR, is the sharpest example in the data because the choke point held for 30 years against an ROI that was always visible. The economics always supported the case. A 2024 analysis by the Centre for Global Development estimated that improving innovation and universal access to high-quality AMR treatment would cost approximately 63 billion US dollars per year and deliver a global return on investment of 28 to 1 by 2050. The status quo cost, hospital costs attributable to resistant infections runs at $693 billion annually. Without intervention, AMR costs are projected to reach $159 billion per year by 2050, more than double the $66 billion it costs annually today. The economics crossed decades ago. The solution architecture existed. The market position was real. New antibiotic development stalled. Anyway, the reason was a single institutional choke point: volume-based reimbursement. Antibiotics are most valuable, when used sparingly to prevent resistance. Sparse use meant low sales volumes. Low sales volumes meant developers could recoup R&D costs only under exceptional circumstances. Correct clinical behavior, economically unattractive commercial behavior. Capital looked at the field, saw the choke point, and redirected elsewhere. The barrier was a market design failure, an incentive structure built for a different era of medicine, held in place by institutional inertia that made a 28-to-1 return on investment commercially irrelevant. In August 2024, the NHS moved its antimicrobial subscription model from pilot to full operational procurement. Payments are now delinked from sales volume. Developers received a fixed annual fee up to £20 million per drug, regardless of how many prescriptions are written. The United States PASTEUR Act, reintroduced in 2026, proposes fixed annual payments of $75 million to $300 million per novel antibiotic, projecting a 125-to-1 social return on investment. The choke point dissolved. The position opened. Shionogi and Entasis Therapeutics are among the organizations that moved into AMR development specifically because the reimbursement architecture changed. The capital did not change. The science did not change. The market design changed, and the positions became available. 30 years of dissolved economics. One policy change. The market position was always there, and it became buildable. How to spot a choke point. 3 tests identify whether you are looking at a choke point at all. If this point is blocked, does the rest of the model stall? If it moved tomorrow, would your unit economics and delivery model already work? Does the leverage sit in one decision, in one place, by one class of actor? Once you've confirmed the choke point, 2 further tests establish what kind it is. Does this barrier persist regardless of further cost reduction? Structural. Is there a named rule, code, or convention holding it in place? Institutional. Can you point to a jurisdiction or sector where it has already moved on the same facts? Institutional. The 8 choke points. The Chokepoint Map covers 8 categories. Each appears in the data across the 11 fields. Each has dissolved examples. The test for every barrier is the same. Does this constraint belong to the problem or to the institution that last tried? Incentive and market design. The commercial model makes solving the problem economically unattractive, even when the ROI is clear. AMR is the anchor. Volume-based reimbursement made correct clinical behavior commercially irrational for 30 years. The NHS subscription model changed the payment logic. The field became investable on the same science and the same need. Measurement and verification. No verifiable outcome unit means no procurement decision. The choke point is not the data. It is the measurement architecture that makes the solution contractable. Where that architecture exists, capital follows. Identity and access. The end beneficiary cannot be reached at a cost the model can sustain. India's Jam Trinity dissolved this at scale across 1.3 billion people. Founders who have built businesses will recognize this pattern. KYC, onboarding, and channel access were choke points they dissolved in their first chapter. The same dissolution is underway across multiple hard problem markets. Infrastructure. In several fields, the physical and digital infrastructure wall has gone. What remains is institutional residue, permitting friction, outdated grid codes, absent common protocols. These look like infrastructure choke points. They belong to the institution. Financing and risk structure. The capital exists but sits in the wrong structure. Paygo Solar converted a US $200 upfront barrier into a $10 US entry point. Parametric Insurance sent $300 million US to Caribbean governments within 2 weeks of Hurricane Beryl, triggered by wind speed data. The choke point was the risk structure. The risk structure was institutional. Regulatory. Yesterday's rulebook governs today's economics. The rest is direct. Does this constraint exist because of the problem or because the institution that last attempted to solve it? Many regulatory barriers have yet to update to match the current cost structure. Most will. Trust and legitimacy. The cost curves have moved, but the human confidence layer has yet to follow. Trust is earned through proximity, not purchased through scale. The organizations that hold it, built over years inside the problem, hold a position that capital alone cannot replicate. These are soft power assets. They are what converts a calculated market position into a defensible one. Workforce and gatekeepers. The previous model required accredited specialists at ratios the system could not sustain. More than 169 million Americans live in a mental health professional shortage area. The technology to offload large portions of the work now exists. The choke point is the professional architecture held in place by credentialing and habit, not by the requirements of the problem itself. For someone who has navigated complex systems at scale, whether building and selling a market, allocating capital across markets, or stewarding wealth across generations, several of these will be immediately recognizable. The choke points have different names, but the same structure. The difference in hard problem fields is institutional age. The barriers are older, more embedded, and in many cases already dissolving without having anyone updated the map. How to turn the diagnosis into a decision. The Chokepoint Map runs 2 questions. They're quick to ask, slower to answer well. 1. Is this barrier intrinsic to the problem, or does it belong to the institution that last tried? 2. If it belongs to the institution, has that institution already exited, reformed, or changed conditions? A third check refines both. Can you point to a country, sector, or program where this same barrier has already shifted under similar conditions? If yes, the choke point is institutional. If the answer is nowhere, look harder before assuming the constraint is structural. Most models encounter a mix. A financing structure choke point that is dissolved, a verification choke point that is yet to move, a regulatory barrier that is institutional but still active. The choke point map produces a precise picture of where the friction actually sits. The precision, is the basis for deciding where to direct the next 5 years. Deploying effort against a constraint that no longer exists is one of the most expensive mistakes a well-designed model makes. Assuming a constraint is structural when it belongs to the institution is the second. Both are common, both are calculable. How problems are market positions. The crossover point tells you whether the economics support a position. The choke point map tells you whether the path is clear. Together they answer the question that matters: is it worth the next decade? And can I build something that holds? The AMR story is the answer in compressed form. The ROI was always there. The choke point held the position closed. The institution changed. The organizations that calculated it correctly moved first. That sequence is repeating: energy, finance, health, legal systems, water, education. The positions vacated by existing institutions go to whoever arrives with the right calculation and the right assets. Our problems are market positions. The choke point map is how you establish whether yours is clear to build into. The business case calculation. The business case calculation applies the choke point map to your specific problem and position. It's 90 minutes, 1 page, delivered within 48 hours. See the link in the article. And the Q1 soft power brief applies the 3 calculations to 5 organizations that have already crossed the crossover point. Each is building a global market position. It's available at the Soft Power Index. Link available in the article.